Hey guys, it's Haley. I know that I haven't done a video in quite a long time, um, and I really just kind of wanted to talk about some very big issues that affect me quite personally. I'm going to warn you now that this will be a very long video as I kind of rant and explain things. And if, any of you are sensitive about hearing things regarding eating disorders, I suggest that you go somewhere else because this is solely going to be about eating disorders from both sides of the spectrum, from anorexia to compulsion eating. So I apologize in advance for how long this is going to be. I am very passionate about the subject, considering that I myself struggle with eating disorders, and I will get to that all in a little bit. So today I made a post on Tumblr about eating disorders and eating disorder awareness, mainly because I've felt like I've been kind of pushed aside when I tell people that I have eating disorders, because they frankly don't believe me, because I say, hey, I used to be anorexic and I still deal with that shit, and they just look at me and they're like, well, there's no fucking way because you are overweight. And that's not how things work at all. But anyways, what I ended up saying in the post was this: always remember that eating disorders can develop in anyone, regardless of age, gender, or race. If someone tells you that they have an eating disorder, believe them. Don't push them away. They're reaching out to you for a reason. And for those of you who do have an eating disorder, I don't care if you're male, female, trans, young, old, big, skinny, or average. Eating disorders happen to the best of us. Don't make yourself feel even worse by thinking that you shouldn't have an eating disorder just because people tell you that you can't possibly have an eating disorder, or because you're different than the small portion of people that the media publicizes. Believe me, it's not going to help you in the slightest. You should focus on facing your disorders and working to overcome them. I know it can be difficult, but it's worth it. Being healthy is better than putting yourself in harm's way. I've struggled with various eating disorders for most of my life, and while I'm still trying to overcome them, I have a pretty damn good reason to keep trying. I want to live. I want to be healthy. I want to have kids and live a long, happy, wonderful life with my family. You have something to strive towards. You have something to be healthy for. Reach out, grab it, and never let go. Don't let an eating disorder take that away from you. And the one response that I got to this post on Tumblr was simply this: that's all. Scattered clapping. That is it. And that made me feel incredibly upset, because while I might not have worded it the best way that I probably could have, it's an important thing. It's an important issue that needs to be talked about, because we don't. The media publicizes, all these horrible things, anorexia and bulimia mainly, and the only thing that you see is skinny white girls in their 20s and their teens. You never hear anybody talk about the black girls that have this problem. You never hear about the black guys that have this problem. You never hear about Indians who have this problem, Mexicans who have this problem, anybody else who has this problem. All you hear about is Caucasians. That is it. You never hear about the other people who have these problems. You never see a bigger person who has anorexia or bulimia. You never see people who are even average sized who have these problems. You see the super skinny people who are on their deathbeds. And the problem with that is that it conditions us to see things a certain way. It conditions us to discriminate against the people who claim to have these problems. And I say claim very sarcastically, because if somebody tells you that they have an eating disorder, you should probably believe them, because it is scary. It is some scary shit to deal with. And it's hard when people don't believe you, because you go through life and you try to get help and nobody helps you, because nobody believes you even. Nobody even tries. They sit there and they tell you that that's not possible, that you can't possibly have these problems. And that is the most rude and untrue thing I have ever heard in my entire life. I'm sorry. I get really emotional sometimes about this kind of stuff. But in any case, I didn't just leave it alone. I kept going. And this was my response. Let me explain to you a thing. This is a huge problem. I've experienced having people tell me that I couldn't possibly have an eating disorder because I wasn't extremely thin. It was only my very closest friends that noticed that I never ate at school, that I never ate the food that they offered me, and that I hardly ate anything when we went out. People often assume that to be anorexic or bulimic, you have to be extremely thin, when that isn't the case at all. There are overweight people who are anorexic or bulimic, and there are average-sized people who are anorexic or bulimic, in addition to the super skinny people we see publicized. Everything varies depending on metabolism, how extreme their disorder has become, and other lifestyle choices and habits. This holds true with the opposite end of the spectrum as well. Anybody can end up stress eating, comfort eating, or compulsion eating, and have it take a huge toll on their health. Even the super skinnies. There are super skinny people out there who eat way too much and have problems with sugar levels, with diabetes, everything that is related to compulsion eating, stress eating, and comfort eating. This, in and of itself, can cause people to become incredibly confused, depressed, or even angry. Another thing is that the media is constantly skewing the way that we see things, often concentrating on a small group of people. People outside of this small group can feel strange and even guilty about their issues, because according to the media, it doesn't or shouldn't happen to them as often as it does to that one particular group of people. It makes them, the people affected, it makes them wonder, why am I like this? Why me? Why am I different than everybody else? When really they're not. They're the same as everybody else who has these eating disorders. It just isn't publicized. It isn't shown to us that way. For me, everything about this pushed me from one end of the spectrum to the other, leaving me constantly bouncing back and forth, creating a confusing, harmful cycle of not eating and then eating copious amounts of junk food. Honestly, it's dangerous, and it tears me apart inside, because I have two very different forces pulling me all at the same time, but they are both linked to the same thing and can be triggered by that same exact thing. Then I see what it's doing to me health-wise. And not only do I cringe, but I get even more depressed and upset, and everything gets worse. The cycle just ends up continuing no matter what I do. So before you dismiss what I'm saying, remember that there are real people facing these very real issues. Sure, there are a lot of people who already are very aware of this kind of stuff, but there are also very ignorant people out there as well. You have no idea the number of weird stares I get when I say that I used to be anorexic and still struggle with anorexic tendencies, and the thought that maybe if I just stopped eating altogether that I would be thin and desirable for once in my life. I don't understand why people don't understand, they don't get it. They're not accepting. They sit there and they judge you over and over. They never believe you when you say various things. You know, if you're overweight and you say, "Oh, I'm anorexic," they never believe you. If you're overweight and you say, "I'm bulimic," they never believe you. And that is something that we honestly need to change, because there is that sort of ignorance in every part of our lives, all because we cannot see past what the media says is true and what is actually true and what is actually happening. There are so many people out there who deal with the same shit that I do, and it hurts. It has always hurt, and it's confusing and frustrating. And sometimes, because of these things, you get brought to the brink of tears on a nightly basis, all because you're different. Because you're seen as different. Because you aren't normal. I mean, these concepts of what's normal and what isn't even goes down into every aspect of our lives. Whether it's, you know, the normal average female body to the average female body of a person who's anorexic. And there's another thing. A lot of people, they think that eating disorders mainly apply to women. And that's not true. There are a lot of men out there as well who deal with eating disorders. A lot of men who starve themselves, who cause themselves pain and torment every day of their lives because they are forcing food back up after every meal. There are also men who constantly overeat, who stress eat, who compulsion eat, who eat nothing but sweets. There's a whole range of people out there who have these problems, and we ignore them, all because the media doesn't address it. And that, it hurts. Like I said before, it really, really hurts. Especially when you've tried to turn to people that you thought were your friends, and you get pushed away because they don't believe you. The more that happens, the more you start to give up and you fall into your own tendencies and your own thoughts, because you can't handle the feeling of people rejecting you and not believing you simply because you aren't normal. It's hard dealing with stuff like this. It's hard, especially when all of a sudden You not only have one eating disorder, but you have two, because you keep flip-flopping from one end of the spectrum to the other. And the worst part is when people believe you about one because of the way your body looks, but won't believe you about the other unless they know you. Unless they really know you. And not a lot of people do. The main people who will actually sit there and believe you are your parents and your significant other. And even then they can be in denial about it. Because they don't want something that's so damaged. Or they just don't know how to help, so they ignore you. They ignore your problems, and that's another thing that this society does that often is for the worse. So next time somebody tells you that they have an eating disorder and they reach out to you for help, do not turn them away. Do not scoff. Do not laugh because they don't fit the normal criteria. You sit there and you help them. You do your best to help them, no matter what emotional bullshit they go through. Because I can tell you right now, it's a struggle. And it is not one that you want to go through alone. It's one that I've been forced to go through alone for many, many years. And you don't need to put other people through that. Honestly. Putting someone through something like that simply because they don't fit the normal criteria, all it's going to do is make them worse. And you know what it does? It ruins your body. It ruins your chances at a normal life. It ruins your mental health. It makes you feel like there is nothing for you here. And it can even get to the point where they become suicidal simply because they feel like nobody cares about them and nobody's willing to help because they're different. They feel like there is nothing left here for them, and they give up. Don't do that to somebody. Please. Do whatever it takes to help.